Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we got started a little bit late. And I appreciate that you all are joining us today. I'm Tricia Malott, the county's Behavioral Health Coordinating Council Supervisor. And this is one of our virtual forum presentations for the 2020-2021 McLean County Community Behavioral Health Forum. If you have joined us in the past, you know that this event is normally an annual in-person event, usually held in October. And due to COVID-19, our planning committee worked to come up with a series of topics that last until almost May, and that we decided to hold it virtually and at different times rather than all on one day, in hopes that more people can join us. So we are thankful that you're here. The original idea for the forum came out of the McLean County Mental Health Action Plan that was pushed through by the county board in 2015 and identified a number of goals with regard to behavioral health within our community. And one of those was information sharing to also help reduce stigma surrounding behavioral health, help connect individuals with resources, and really just continue to educate. A few housekeeping tips. We will take questions. We will not ask questions of our presenter until the end of the presentation. So if you have them throughout, please use the questions field in your toolbox or the chat feature. Our question moderator for the day is my behavioral health specialist, Kevin McCall, who is also with our department. And he will keep track of all the questions and ask them of Ben at the end. We do ask that you're specific with your questions since they're not asked in the moment, so please provide context. With that, I will introduce our speaker for today. Ben Tracy is the keynote speaker on digital citizenship and responsible social media use. Ben shares his own powerful story about how teenage social media posts impacted his life and does so at schools, colleges, and organizations across the country. He speaks to more than 100,000 students, parents, and professionals each year. Additionally, Ben is the founder of Safe Social Network, a website and online platform that provides useful information about technology and online safety. Ben graduated magna cum laude from St. Xavier University in Chicago, where he studied business and political science. He was also captain of the track and field team. I will also add that Ben is a once McLean County resident and grew up here as well. Ben is currently training for a 100-mile ultramarathon in October 2021 and has partnered with the Anti-Defamation League, an organization that fights all forms of bias, discrimination, and hate. So thank you, Ben, for joining us, and I will turn it over to you. And you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, can you see my screen okay, Trish?
I muted myself, but yes, I can.
Okay, good. Okay, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Tricia Malott, for putting this together and for thinking of me and inviting me to be a part of this. So I appreciate that. So typically, when I speak at schools, where I start is I show some social media posts from the students at that school. So obviously, I know that there are parents on from all over McLean County and possibly beyond. So I didn't do that today. But typically I show inappropriate posts from the students at that school just to show them how easy it is to find, that some person who doesn't even know them can find these inappropriate posts online, usually in 5 to 10 minutes or so. So that's what I typically do. I didn't do that today, but the reason I do that is 70% of employers look at social media now. That's actually more than look at grade point average. So let me say that again. An employer is more likely to look at your kids' social media accounts than their grade point average. 35% of college admissions counselors look at social media. I also speak to a lot of college athletes, and these coaches tell me, yeah, Ben, we look at social media accounts before we give out a scholarship. Because as a coach, we don't know, when we find these inappropriate and derogatory posts, are these posts actually reflective of who this person is and of this person's character? Or is this person just making these inappropriate comments and social media posts as a joke, and maybe they don't understand that they're actually offensive and derogatory? But either way, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to give scholarships to kids who have posts like this. That's what these college coaches tell me. The other reason I bring that up, that point, and how easy they are to find, is somebody actually did the same thing to me, thinking about employers looking at social media. Somebody actually went back through my social media posts from when I was a teenager, but mine didn't get put up on a Zoom or PowerPoint screen. Let me show where my social media posts got me. So as Trish said, I grew up in McLean County. I grew up in Colfax. I went to Ridgeview for school. And I was a kid who did a lot of stuff right growing up. I got a scholarship to run track at St. Xavier here in Chicago. And while I was there, I did all the things that you should do. I double majored, a 4.0, captain of the track team, student senate, internships. I had a great resume. So I graduate from college, and my first job is working in Illinois politics, which if you follow the news at all, you know that was probably my first mistake. So I get this job, and my job is running political campaigns. So I was helping a guy running for Illinois State Senate. And I did well with that, and I kind of moved up the ranks. And I get a call in the summer of 2017, so 3.5 years ago now. It's one of my colleagues at the time. And this person says, Ben, we'd like you to interview for a job with the governor of Illinois. Now, this is our former governor, Bruce Rauner. We'd like you to interview for a job with the governor. And what the job is, if you get it, you'll be his personal assistant. So you'll travel around with him everywhere he goes. You'll prepare him for his media appearances. You'll be his liaison between his staff in Chicago and in Springfield. And so that's what the job will be. So that's on a Friday morning, I get that call. That same afternoon, Friday afternoon, I go in and I interview with the governor and his staff and so forth. And they say, Ben, we'll get back to you over the weekend to let you know if you got this job. So they call me Sunday night, say his staff says, Ben, Rauner really likes you. He wants you to start tomorrow, Monday morning. So I show up, and it's like you would expect a job like this to be, right? There's this, the Rauner lived in a skyscraper downtown Chicago. There's this motorcade. There's cop cars in the front and in the back. And here I am. I'm in this big black SUV. There's two like state troopers driving, and it's me and the governor sitting in the back seat, side by side. So our agenda for the day is we have two events we have to do, two press conferences. The first one is actually down by Decatur. It was in Mount Zion. So the first one's in Mount Zion, second one's in Rockford, and then we're going to go back to Chicago. So we get to Mount Zion, we're going in to do this press conference. And as we're walking in, I look at my phone, and I have all these new followers on my Twitter account. And in my head, I think this is a good thing. Like a lot of us, right? More is good when it comes to followers. Doesn't really matter who they are, why they're following me, but more people are following me, and I think this is a good thing. Obviously, someone has found out that I got this job. Apparently, they care what I have to say and tweet, and I think that that's a good thing. So we go in, we do this press conference in Mount Zion, we come back out, we get in this SUV again, and we're going to go to the second press conference up in Rockford. Look at my phone again. Once again, have a bunch of new followers, but also I have messages, texts, calls, any way you can get a hold of me, emails, and they're all saying the same thing. Ben, delete your tweets, put your Twitter on private. This blog that a lot of the political and government type people here in Illinois follow, this blog has screenshots of a few of your tweets from 2012 and 2013. So for a little context, I was a senior in high school at Ridgeview in 2012. This is happening in 2017. So here I am in the car, the governor's sitting right next to me, and I've got my phone out and I'm trying to delete these tweets as fast as I possibly can. But at this point, I've got thousands of tweets. I mean, 4,000 or 5,000 tweets, and they're referencing 4 or 5 tweets from when I first got Twitter. So I can't even find these tweets to even delete them, right? I mean, it's literally like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So finally, I just delete the whole Twitter account. I figure, you know what? That's quicker and easier than trying to find these things one by one. But it's too late. This blog already has these screenshots. It's this picture on my Twitter account. These are clearly things that I tweeted out. So I get a call from one of this governor's staffers. Now, this is a person that I've never met. Again, this is my first day on this job. And this person says, you know, Ben, I'm sure you know by now, but this blog has these screenshots of a few of your inappropriate tweets, and they were inappropriate. And Ben, you know, we don't think these tweets are actually reflective of your character or reflective of the person you are today. But the reality is they're inappropriate, and you're working in a job in very close proximity to the governor and in a very public position. And Ben, we just can't have someone with that type of baggage in that position, working in that position. So Ben, when you guys get back to Chicago today, at the end of the day today, you're fired. You're fired. 5 hours into this job, I've been fired based on tweets that I made when I was a teenager living in McLean County. So it's a little awkward at this point, right? Because I'm still locked in the car with the governor. So as you can imagine, the conversation went pretty stale at that point. So we keep driving, and I get a call from another one of Rauner staffers. And this again is another person I've never met. And this person, they're back in Chicago. We're, you know, out driving from Mount Zion to Rockford. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere. And this person asks if I'm still in the car with Rauner. And I, of course, say yes. And this person goes, well, you know, Ben, we don't think it would make for a very good story for the two of you to be seen together, photographed together at this next event. So could you just make sure that you kind of stay out of sight and that you're not photographed with them, and definitely don't talk to the media. That's what they told me. So we literally pull off the side of the highway. We stop at this little gas station, and I get myself and my stuff out of this SUV with the governor, and I get into one of the follow-up cars in this motorcade. And so while he does this second press conference in Rockford, I just have to sit there in the car and stay out of sight and don't talk to the media. That's what they told me. So we finally make it back to Chicago, and I know that this is likely to be a news story based on the tweets in and of themselves, of course, the governor and his relationship with the media and kind of the political situation at the time, some stuff he'd done in terms of bringing in new staff and getting rid of some other staff that he'd had, and then the media and their tendency, I guess, to write these headlines such as this one, kind of the attention-grabbing, clickbaiting headlines. I knew that all those things combined, that this was likely to be a news story. So I at least wanted to get ahead of it with my friends and my family. And so I wanted them to hear it from me before they saw it on the news or read about it in the newspaper. So I had to call my parents, my twin sister, some of my very good friends who I knew would rightfully be offended by the content of a couple of these tweets. I had to call my grandparents, and my grandparents are in their 90s. They don't even know what Twitter is, what a tweet is. So explain all this to them. Tell them I even had this job. This is how fast this happened. That I'd been fired from this job. And then oh, by the way, Grandma, you may not want to read the newspaper tomorrow because there's a pretty good chance I'll be in it, and they're probably not going to be saying very nice things about me. And the next day, the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times. I mean, literally, as most of you probably know, hundreds of thousands of people get and read this newspaper each day. And it all happened fast. Think about that timeline that I just laid out. Friday morning, I'm just working on these political campaigns. Friday afternoon, I interview for this job. Sunday, they tell me that I'm hired. Monday, I start and get fired. And Tuesday, it's on the front page of the second largest newspaper in this state. And I'm 23 years old. I'm exactly 1 year out of college, and I'm 5 years removed from being a high school student at a little small rural high school in McLean County. And that's one of the things I hear with things like what happened with me, as well as some of the stuff I'll talk about later as it relates to sexting and online predators and stuff like that. I hear often from young people as well as parents, well, that would never happen to me. That would never happen to my kid. That would never happen to my family. But it happened to me, and I grew up in a very similar way to, I'm sure, everyone who's listening to this and their kids. So just know it can absolutely, this sort of thing can absolutely happen to you. I didn't know when I was tweeting these things out, obviously, that I was going to go on to have a job like this. And so, you know, I'd like to share a few kind of big picture thoughts that I had first, and then move to some ways to kind of more education, what apps the kids are using and how to keep them safe and help them make smart decisions. So the first kind of big picture thing that I thought about immediately after this and for, you know, a long time after is obviously, and hopefully this is obvious, but I think it's important to say, my tweets were inappropriate and they were wrong. And it's not language that I would have used at 23 when I got fired from this job, or language that I would use today, or language that I would condone anyone using. So I just want to make that point very clear. And that is part of this too, right? Like, obviously I'm talking about social media today and how to keep your kids safe and what is appropriate and what's not. But part of the conversation too as parents is talking to your kids about what is appropriate language, both on and offline in 2021. What's appropriate? What can you say and what can you not say? And kind of the thought pattern that will go into leading you to say or post something like that. So that's a big part of this as well. So I just want to make that clear that my posts were wrong. The second thing I thought about a lot, and I think these two things can both exist at the same time. One, the posts were wrong. My posts and a lot of the other kids who have gotten in trouble for posting things like this. But at the same time, one of the things I thought a lot about was how this all came to be, and kind of this, for lack of a better term, phrase, I guess, the cancel culture. And I hate that phrase because it's been politicized and it's been hijacked by adults who have done horrible things and who have said things when they know that they're wrong and they're inappropriate. But what I'm referring to as is young people who have their lives ruined over something that they said or posted years ago, that somebody goes back through years of their posts, or somebody records them saying something inappropriate when they're 15 years old and holds on to that until they go to college 4 years later, and then sends it to the college to try and get them kicked out of that school. You know, I think that's wrong too. And most of these kids, of course, sometimes it's malicious and ill-intended, but I think in a lot of cases, the kids don't fully, when they say things when they're 14 years old, 13 years old, whenever it is, when they first get these devices, they don't know what's appropriate and what's not, and they may not have a full understanding of that. So in 4 or 5 years, especially during their teenage years, they hopefully have become educated and more responsible and more mature. And so I just don't think it's appropriate that you should have to look at your kid and say, hey, you can do everything right. You can go to college, you can get good grades, you can have a great resume, and you can still lose a job or not get a job or get kicked out of college and lose your reputation based on something that you say when you're a child. I think that is wrong. And I think that's something that we need to think about, and how, I don't know what the answer is, but I know continuing to do this is not helpful for anyone, because oftentimes the people who do this, who find these posts and send them off to an employer, a college, or what have you, oftentimes it comes full circle, because we've all said and done things we regret, even the adults who didn't have social media, and it's easy for them to say, well, it's inappropriate. It's a lot easier than looking back and thinking over what they may have said when they were teenagers. So that's one of the other kind of big picture thoughts that I had that I'd like to share as well. So thank you for indulging me in my personal story. But what I want to do now is transition to the apps that the kids are using and how do we keep them safe. So quickly, I'm just going to run through a few of the most popular apps that teenagers are using today. And so the first one is YouTube. I won't spend much time on that. If you're on this webinar and can log in and watch this, I'm sure you're familiar with YouTube. TikTok is a newer one. It's short form videos. They're often set to dancing and music. It was formerly an app called Musical.ly, and so it became TikTok. This app has grown exponentially in the last year or two. And when I would go to the schools, I would ask the kids, which apps are you using? And I would say TikTok, and almost every hand in the room would go up. And they would also kind of laugh and giggle and look at their friends when I said TikTok. So I realized after a while of doing that, when they laugh and giggle, that's one as parents that you should probably take a look at. Then another common popular one is Instagram. So Instagram is owned by Facebook. It's similar in that it's pictures and videos. There's a main feed that people can comment on, can like the photos. It also has a story feature across the top of Instagram. So that is similar to Snapchat, which is the next app I'll talk about here. But it stays there for 24 hours and then it goes away. So they also recently added what's called Reels, R-E-E-L-S, on Instagram, which is essentially TikTok within the Instagram platform. Another thing to be aware of with Instagram, another new feature they added is what's called vanish mode. So basically people can send text and pictures back and forth without there being a record of it. It disappears, similar again to Snapchat, which I'll talk about now. So Snapchat is an app that has been around for a while now, very popular with the young people, and it's disappearing pictures and messages. So the story feature, again, like Instagram, stays there for 24 hours, and anyone who follows them on Snapchat can see what's on the story. But it also allows direct communication between two or more people. And oftentimes, I would say of the kind of horror stories I've heard with social media, 90% of them revolve around this app, Snapchat. So the kids think, well, these messages disappear. That's the idea with Snapchat. The other person looks at the photo or the text and then it's gone. And so they're the only person who sees that. But what oftentimes happens is the person who receives the photo or the message screenshots it and then has that picture to do with whatever they want. So I'll get into Snapchat a little bit more later. But again, one of the very, very popular ones. The next one, WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is another app that's owned by Facebook. It essentially has all the same features as texting, but the kids, I found that WhatsApp tends to be a little more inappropriate in what they say and put into these messages than text, right? And the main reason being is parents have started to catch on, okay, I'm gonna look at my kids' texts, but maybe parents don't know what WhatsApp is or that it even exists, so parents don't look at that one. So it essentially has all the features of texting, but it's an app called WhatsApp, and it again is owned by Facebook. Discord is another popular one. So this app originally, it has video, text chat, voice, and it originally became popular because the kids would communicate while they were playing a video game. They would use this Discord app to communicate with one another. Well, now the app is kind of used for just general communication. It's a basic communication app, just like some of these other ones, and it doesn't necessarily even involve the video games all the time now. So those are the most popular apps. Less so Facebook, less so Twitter. I ask those questions at school, and there's maybe a quarter of the room will raise their hand for both Facebook and Twitter. So if you're a parent who, I know it's easy to think, well, I have my kid on Facebook, so I know they're not doing anything inappropriate. If your kid does happen to be on Facebook, Facebook is the most PG of any of the apps that they're going to be on. So these are pretty much the most popular apps in order. So thinking about your kids and what they're doing online, these are the apps that you definitely want to look at. Okay, so moving on to social media and mental health and how those two things are related to one another. So when I first got into doing these talks, I would pretty much just go tell my story, and it was, don't post inappropriate stuff. It could cause you a lot of problems and embarrassment, and cause you to lose out on college and job opportunities and so on and so forth. But once I started doing this and actually researching it, and especially talking to kids and parents, I realized there is so much more going on here. This is so much deeper and so much worse than losing a job and getting your picture put on in the newspaper. That what's going on online is really affecting these kids mentally. So this chart, it was done by a lady named Jean Twenge. She's a professor of psychology. She wrote a book on this. She did a TED Talk on it, which I highly recommend. So there's 4 lines on this chart, 2006 to 2016. And basically, her hypothesis was depression and unemployment would be closely correlated with one another. But what she actually found is, over this whole 10-year period, much more closely correlated was depression, having a smartphone, and the amount of time per day an individual is spending online. So what she found was 0 to 2 hours, there was some correlation, but at 2 hours and each hour thereafter, this relationship got stronger and stronger. So I would highly recommend watching her TED Talk, and she goes into a lot more detail and depth about this. But another stat that I'd like to share, and this is from the CDC. I know we all love the CDC stats these days, but here's one maybe you haven't heard. The suicide rate amongst 10 to 14-year-olds tripled between 2007 and 2017. It increased 76% amongst older teenagers. Depression has gone up, anxiety has gone up. And that's not to say that correlation is causation, but there are several studies tying these two things to one another. And the biggest change in young people's lives during this 10-year period is they all got smartphones, they all got social media, and we all spend more and more and more time on these devices. So I think it's at least worth considering what may be going on here. And again, when I'll travel, I'll ask these kids, why is this happening? Tell me, talk to me. And they raise their hands and they say the same two things over and over. I say, is this social media? Is it something else? Just let me know. And they raise their hand and they say the same two things. The first thing they say is cyberbullying. The kids saying horrible things to one another online. And now I know that it's easy for parents to think, and because parents say this to me sometimes, well, bullying's always happened, or it's a rite of passage. This is nothing new. I got bullied when I was a kid. Well, here's the difference between when you were a kid and now. Now it's 24/7. Your kids can't get away from it. Maybe you got bullied or someone you knew got bullied, but that was 8 o'clock in the morning when you went to school, and at 3 p.m. you could pretty much go home and get away from it. But now it's 24/7. And on top of that, it's often done on these fake accounts. They call them Finstas, which is fake Instagram, or some of these other apps who allow anonymous communication. So that's kind of a good standard. Any app that allows anonymous communication is not a good one. Your kids should not be on that app. So 24/7 anonymous fake accounts, kids don't even know where it's coming from. They don't know if it's someone at their school, if it's one of their friends, who's even behind the account. And I can tell you, and maybe this wouldn't be cyberbullying, but the person who looked up my tweets from 5 years before was actually an individual who worked for the same governor, Governor Rauner, who I was going to work for. And this person had been working in Illinois politics for a long time. And he got fired the week that I was getting hired. It's an older guy. He was upset about that. So he went through these 5 years of these tweets, found a handful that, again, were inappropriate, screenshotted them. He then created a fake Twitter account, fake picture, fake name, so it was all done anonymously. And he took these screenshots and he started tagging this blog that I referenced and the Chicago political reporters. That's how it all came to be, through an anonymous app. And I can tell you, it didn't feel very good when that was being done to a 23-year-old adult. How do you think it feels for your 12-year-old kid who you've given a smartphone and people are doing the same thing to them? And they don't know how to respond to it. Their brains aren't developed, and they don't even know who's doing it. So that's the first thing I hear, is cyberbullying. The second thing these kids tell me is, I feel like social media is a popularity contest, that I'm not as cool, that I don't have as much going on in my life as the next person, because that person has 1,000 followers on Instagram and I only have 500. So what you need to remind your kids, it's not real, and probably yourselves too, because I think that the adults do this as well. It's not real. It's all manipulated. People go places just to take pictures and post them on Instagram. I mean, I could share all sorts of stories that I've heard of people doing that and posing certain places and standing in front of private airplanes that they didn't even go on to take a picture to post on Instagram to make it look like they did. There's all sorts of things like that. So just remind your kids, it's not real, and it's a highlight reel. Everybody posts the good stuff, not the bad stuff. Everybody posts their great days and not their bad days. And it just makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, if your kid is someone who's laying there in Bloomington on winter break for 9 hours a day scrolling through Instagram, and all they're seeing is their friends in Florida in a swimsuit in a manipulated photo that's been edited for 2 or 3 days before they even posted it. Well, if they do that for hours and days and weeks and years, that over time, it's not going to make them feel great about themselves. So just keep that in mind and constantly remind your kids and again, probably yourselves, that's what social media actually is. Okay, so the next thing I want to go through here is sexting and online predators. So this topic is more important than ever right now. So reports of online predators increased 90% in 2020 over 2019. So these pedophiles and these online predators, they are taking advantage of kids having increased screen time, spending more time on these devices, and then just a lack of supervision, right? And so it makes the kids easier targets. So this is very, very important right now. So the sexting really takes, I've found as I've kind of done this, it really happens in 3 forms. And the first form is 2 teenagers or 2 young people who are talking, or they're in a dating relationship, and one of them or both send these inappropriate photos. So there are a couple outcomes that often happens. The first one is the person who receives this inappropriate photo then decides, you know what, a few of my friends might like to see this photo. So they send it to a couple of their friends. And then those friends do the same thing. And the next thing you know, this inappropriate photo has made its way around the entire school. Or in my case, being from a small town, everybody in town knows about it pretty quickly, right? So I've heard of young people having to transfer schools, or having increased anxiety or depression, or becoming suicidal because everyone they know has seen this inappropriate photo. The other form the other kind of outcome that occurs between the young people sending these inappropriate photos is the person who possesses these inappropriate photos of the other person. They use these photos to manipulate that person into staying together, or getting back together with them, or into doing something they're not comfortable with, or into sending more of these photos. And so they say, well, if you don't send me more photos, or if you don't do this thing that I'm not comfortable with, I'm going to take that photo and I'm going to release it, and I'm going to show it to everyone. So that's called sextortion, which is illegal, obviously. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next point I'm going to make, which is the second form that the sexting often takes is when a pedophile or one of these online predators, someone who the young person doesn't even know, creates these fake accounts, and they act like they're a teenager or a young person, and they start talking to your kids and getting your kids to send them these inappropriate photos. So maybe the best way to explain this would just be a story that I heard at a school where I was a speaker. I did a parent talk in the evening, and one of the parents came up to me and she said, and this is in St. Louis, my daughter is a 16-year-old girl here at this high school. She has Instagram. She was talking to this 16-year-old guy from the other side of St. Louis through Instagram direct messages. They start talking, and this guy convinces my daughter to send him an inappropriate photo of herself. She sends this photo. She then finds out that this is in fact not a 16-year-old guy from the other side of town. This is actually a 50-year-old man who lives in Canada. So this 50-year-old man from Canada then says to this young girl, while I know you now know who I am, I want you to send me another inappropriate photo. I want you to send me an inappropriate video. Actually, I'm going to come from Canada to St. Louis, and I want to meet up with you. Now, if you don't send me that picture, send me that video, or meet up with me, I'm going to take that first picture you sent me, thinking I was this 16-year-old guy from the other side of town, and I'm going to send that to all your friends, because you tag your friends in every Instagram post you make, so I know exactly who your friends are. I've looked you up on Facebook, and I've identified who your mom is, so I'm going to send this first inappropriate photo to your mom. We've talked enough that I know what activities you're involved with at school, so I'm going to send that first photo to your coaches and the director of those activities as well. That's sextortion. That's illegal. These people are criminals and they're predators, and they deserve to be in jail. And you have to report these people, which I'll talk about in just a second. The third form that this sexting often takes is between a young person and an adult. The difference between this and the last point that I made is that it's an adult they know. And I hear stories like this all the time. It's a teacher or a coach, and they use these apps, especially apps like Snapchat, where the messages and photos disappear. And they use these apps to target these young people, to groom these young people, and to manipulate these young people into doing things that they know are wrong, that are illegal, that they're uncomfortable with. But these people are in a position of authority, and then they use these disappearing apps. So the kids are really in a tough spot. Okay, this person's making me feel uncomfortable, but it's my coach. What's right, what's wrong, what's appropriate, what's not. So here's, I guess, probably I should just share a story. Because again, this is another thing parents think this could never happen. This would never happen in my school. This would never happen in my family, not to my kid. Well, this summer, there was a teacher at Ridgeview, the high school where I attended, And he was arrested, thankfully, by the McLean County Sheriff's Department. So if there's anybody on from the Sheriff's Department, thank you very much. This individual was arrested for doing just this, sending inappropriate messages to young girls. This is a 30, 40-year-old man, had been in teaching at Ridgeview since 2012, and had actually been doing this to these young girls since 2012. Sending these inappropriate messages and photos, I think, through Snapchat, and then talking to these girls and getting these girls to meet with them, and then sexually abusing minors. So for 8 years, this went on. From 2012 to 2020, this individual got away with this. And the main reason was nobody reported him. The Sheriff's Department found this guy, tracked him down, and arrested him pretty quickly after somebody reported it. But for 8 years, nobody had reported it. So that's one of the things that that you must do as parents, and if there's kids watching, report these online predators. And what the law enforcement need, they need 3 things: screenshots, exactly what this person sent to you or to your kid, the social media handle from which they sent it, and then a written account of exactly what happened, even your kid's part in it, because a lot of times the kids are complicit, they have done something wrong. That needs to be in there as well. The mistake that a lot of families make is they go to the social media company first. So say it happens through Snapchat. They contact Snapchat and they say, Snapchat, this is this online predator. Please remove this account. Well, Snapchat will do that. The problem is it makes it harder for the police to actually find the person, and tie the person in the account together and actually arrest this person and bring this person to justice. So by going to the law enforcement first, it gives them a better opportunity to actually find the person, track this person down, and then they'll work with the social media company, or your family can work with the social media company to actually get the account removed. So that's the order. Go to law enforcement as your first step. Okay, so last slide here, just some recommendations for parents, things to think about, some more tactical ways to actually keep your kids safe. The first says create a family technology agreement. And there's one on our website, safesocialnetwork.com/parent resources. Basically what this is it's an agreement between parent and child that sets out the rules for online behavior. That way, the app, these apps are constantly changing. The features, even within the apps that already exist, are changing. So where apps like Instagram, for a while, it was like, okay, Instagram is not bad compared to some of the other apps. And then they add this vanish mode, and Instagram is no good. So by implementing one of these family technology agreements, you set the rules ahead of time and the consequences of breaking those rules. That way the kids know it's very clear. And the kids will often tell me, I don't even mind rules so much as just knowing what the rules are. But by doing this, as the apps change, you can have the same set of rules and your kids will know what they are. So I think that's a very good starting point, and I would recommend it before giving them the devices. Make them agree to it before you give them their first cell phone or their first tablet or whatever it is, their first social media account, because it's a lot harder to go backwards, to give them these devices, let them run free with them, and then go backward and say, hey, now we're going to put in this family technology agreement. So that should be your first step. The second thing that you should definitely consider is implement a digital bedtime. So you should store the devices outside of the kids' rooms at night. So store them in the parents' room or in some area of the house where the kids can't access them. Charge the devices in there and keep them in there overnight. Because the common theme with the online predators, the sexting, it's just the addiction, these kids staying up on these devices all night, right? Not getting sleep. On top of that, they're getting the blue light off of these devices. So it makes it harder for them to actually fall asleep. Pretty much this blue light makes the body think that it's daytime when it's actually nighttime. So it takes them longer to fall asleep, and they don't actually get as deep of a sleep. So implement this digital bedtime, because again, these online predators know what they're doing. They know when to target your kid to where, okay, if I message this kid at 11 o'clock at night, I'm more likely to elicit an inappropriate photo than if I were to send it at 6 o'clock at night, knowing that they might be eating dinner and mom and dad might actually open this message. So implemented digital bedtime. If there's one thing you're going to do, one thing you take away, that would be it. The next one, actively monitor their accounts. So be on the same apps that your kids are on. First of all, know which apps they're on. Have accounts on those same apps as well. There's other apps out there that can help you as parents monitor this. One is called Bark, B-A-R-K. Basically, it ties in to all the social media accounts, to email accounts, to Google Docs, to Google search queries. And this app will send you a notification as a parent saying, hey, your kid is Google searching inappropriate content. Your kid is being bullied. Your kid is doing the bullying. And so that's a good app I've heard a lot of people like. I would also look into turning the family sharing and the location sharing on. Apple products have this built in. I would turn that on so you know where your kids are without actually having to text them or call them a million times, figuring out where they are. There's another app that does this called Life 360. I know a lot of people like that, a lot of families like that. Again, it's a location tracking app. Just a quick story on that. There was a girl from Colfax who got in a bad car accident in a rural area. There was nowhere for her to go. She was hurt, and the closest house was quite a ways away. But she had the Life 360 app set up with one of her friends, and her friend got the notification that this girl may have been in an accident. So she drove out there, then obviously called the police and got the girl from Colfax the help she needed. So that's another good one. And then along with the monitoring them, make sure that your kids aren't joining these crazy extremist groups online. These things, all these horrible things that you see happening, a lot of this stuff, these people are meeting one another and making their plans in these extremist groups online and on social media and on these chat rooms. So make sure your kids aren't joining that type of stuff, and explain to them why that's wrong. Because a lot of the horrible things that we're seeing happen in society, a lot of that stuff is starting online and connecting a couple crazy people, and it's easy to get for a kid to, what is this? And become involved with that, and it going way too far. So definitely monitor your kids. The next one, set their accounts to private. And the main reason for that is almost all these apps make it more difficult for strangers to contact them if the accounts are set to private. Whereas if the accounts are public, pretty much anybody can contact them. But by having it set to private, it makes it harder for these online predators to even contact the kids. The app just won't let the message go through. The next one, be a good role model. I mean, it's just like anything else. Your kids are going to emulate the behavior that they see. And so I hear from a lot of parents, well, it's easy to give my kid an iPad. I pretty much have a babysitter. But just, and then they see the parents sitting there on the phone all day. But just know that's the behavior that your kid is seeing, and most likely what they're going to do moving forward. So just be a good role model. And the last one, all caps, wait. That's probably the best answer to any of this is don't give the kids devices right away. Make them wait. There's no reason for a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid to have a smartphone, to have access to social media. There's no reason for it. There's apps out there. There's other devices, I should say, that allow you to track your kid's location. There's a product actually that I'm involved with called Gab phone, G-A-B-B. Pretty much it looks like an iPhone, but it doesn't have internet. It doesn't have social media. It's kind of like one of the old flip phones, basically all you can do is text and call on this app. So maybe that's on this phone, excuse me. So maybe that's a good starting phone. Okay, you've shown you're responsible enough to have at least some sort of technology. You're going to start out with the Gab phone. If you're mature and responsible with that for a couple years, maybe then we'll get you an iPhone a few years down the road. But just wait. I mean, and I know it's hard because if one kid's parent gets them a phone, your kid talks to that kid, and your kid comes home and said, well, my friend's parents let him get a phone or her get a phone. Why can't I have one? So I understand all that, but that's the best way to avoid any of this stuff, is just wait as long as possible. So with that, this is our information. info@safesocialnetwork.com is the email. Safe Social Network on Facebook. Ben J. Tracy on Instagram and Twitter. I'm trying to put out content and articles informing parents about what is actually going on, and can help you keep your family safe, help your kids make good decisions. So, that's the reason I do this. If there's one kid who doesn't have to make the mistakes that I made or go through what I went through, that's worth it to me. If there's one online predator that gets reported because I did this today, that makes it worth it to me. So please, please, please feel free to reach out. Any questions you have, I reply to every email, and that's why I do this. So please let me know if there's any way that I can help your family. But with that, Trish, I think we can take questions from any of the attendees if they have them.
Okay. So I want to thank Ben, and I want to remind all of you that if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the questions box or the chat feature. And while we wait to see if any do come in, I think all of this is really helpful information. And I would simply add, this also isn't a new problem. I haven't clinically worked with adolescents for a number of years, but even when I was doing that type of work and with the 12 to 18-year-old age group here within the county, these types of concerns were still issues at that point as well. And it may have looked a little bit different, and there was less technology and apps available than what there are now. But the cyberbullying and reposting of a picture or texting it out to everyone in the school happened. And so now we just happen to live in a society where there's so much media available. And so I want to thank Ben for taking time to help educate the adults in our community so that we can help the kids more. And I'm hopeful that you all found the information useful. And I can add, I do follow Ben on the social media platforms that I'm personally on, and he does regularly put out information or articles about what's going on. And it looks like we may have a question. And so I'll let...
We've got one question here from Shannon Steidinger, and it just says, hi. I know you said you go to schools and present this information, but do you ever present to younger kids around elementary age?
Yes, obviously I present it in a different way depending on the audience, right, of how I talk about the sexting and online predators and things like that. But yeah, I've done as low as I think 3rd grade, so typically though it starts around 5th through 8th is common, but it has gone as low as like 3rd or 4th grade as well. And it's funny, I asked these, the first time I did one that had 4th graders in there, I asked them, how many of you have these devices? And I assumed that very few of them, right? Even in 4th grade, half their hands went up. So it's really as appropriate for any kids that are on there, kind of regardless of the age. And then for parents too, I mean, I do parent talks as well. And I say, if you have kids, now's the time to at least start hearing this information, because I think a lot of parents are a little bit naive to some of this stuff until it's too late, and they think that they're doing this kid this great favor by giving these devices, and I would say most times that's not the case. But yeah, as far as speaking to the students, 4th or 5th grade is usually where it starts.
Okay, great, thank you.
The other thing I'll add while we wait and see if anyone else has questions, Kevin can put in the chat box the website link to our BHCC YouTube page, which is where all of our forum presentations after the fact are uploaded, so that if you missed a piece or you want to go back and revisit a section or the entire presentation, or even share it with other adults or parents that you know, that's an option. We make sure that all of the recordings get put out there. And so usually that is up within about a 24-hour window. It doesn't take too long once our recording is over to be able to put it out there. So we also hope that you share the information. You know, kind of like Ben has made it his mission to make sure that parents and schools and students are educated on all of this. And if he helps one person, then that's worth it to him. The more we share and get that information out there, that helps as well.
Looks like we have one other question that came in here as well, again from Shannon. She says, I have a kiddo that is currently 10 that lives with me, but the other parent has given the phone since 7, made a Facebook for them, let them stay up and play video games, has them chatting online and all this other stuff. When we talk with them, they act like what we're saying is not important as the other parent allows it. So it sounds like there's a little bit of a conflict there. Do you have any advice on a situation like that?
Yeah, and I hear this. This is like, aside from like, you know, the sexting and stuff, this is like the #1 question I get. Very common. When the parents are separated. I mean, because what often happens is one of the parents gives them the phone as like their way to be like the cool parent, the parent's place they want to go to, right? It's like, if mom doesn't let me have a phone and dad does, I want to go to dad's because I have a Facebook and I can talk to all my friends and I can FaceTime them and all these things. So, I mean, the most simple answer is to somehow create an agreement between the two parents. And I mean, and again, I know this is difficult and all the situations are different in how you address this, but just talking to that person, the other person, and saying, hey, like, this isn't about us, this is about our kid. And by giving this kid these devices when they're 7 years old, like, you're doing a disservice to our child, right? And I know that's probably easier said than done. So maybe I don't have a perfect answer to that, but that's the most simple way is, hey, the rules are the same. Okay, the kid has the phone. Okay, maybe he's 10 now. It's going to be tough to take the phone back. I get that, but okay, let's at least, starting now, develop some rules that we can all agree on, and let's, as this child's parents, let's at least agree to both enforce these rules. So I hope that answers your question. I know it's not a perfect answer, but yeah, that is very common, and it's very unfortunate because ultimately it does hurt the child.
Yeah, that's a difficult one, but that's a great answer, Ben. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I don't see any other questions right now, and know that some people have kind of logged off. But Ben, I want to thank you again for taking time and sharing it with us today, and to everyone who attended, and to Ben for patiently navigating some technology issues before we got started, which ironically occurred during our technology presentation. So that irony is not lost on me that today was the day. But thank you again. Again, as Ben said, he is available for questions and response to emails, and his information was on that last slide for all of you. And if you miss it, feel free to either go back and rewatch it, or you're welcome to reach out and contact me, and I can put you in touch with Ben as well. We hope you check out other future sessions that are coming up, as we have several more in January and then all the way through May. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you again, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.